when we signed off the previous episode, we were waffling on about this front panel on the bulkhead. Now it is quite rusty, it does have to go, however, there's a lot of things on it, and it ties in with the vent system above, making its removal quite complicated. Do I have the skills to be able to do that? I don't know, but I want to start off with our exercise for confidence building that's somewhat challenging, and I'm looking at this rain gutter right here. You can see that it's quite rusty, and where I've tried to pick it away to salvage it, didn't go well. I found that when you try to pick one panel from another, you destroy it. All right, I don't think we're going to buy another one of these. So that's where I want to start. I want to see if I can refabricate the rain gutter. Okay, so as far as our measurements go, we'll have that back plate, I reckon around 3/4 of an inch. And then I think we've got an inch span across the bottom. And then a rise at the front of around 1/4 of an inch. We'll give ourselves 1/2 an inch. We've got a grinder. Okay, now I've been finding gauging steel to be a little bit hit and miss. I've got a little tool for it, but I get different results on the same piece of steel. I know what this is. It's 22 gauge because it's written on it. That one over there for the rain gutter might be 18, but I think that would be far too strong and rigid for what I have planned. And you also might notice that this is only 2 foot where we need 4. Well, I don't have 4 foot of steel. Okay, let's give myself 1/2 an inch, 1 inch, and about 7/8. See if we can stitch this together slowly. Wish me all the best. Oh, there we go. Excellent penetration, not hard to do on 22 gauge steel. Just grind it back and see how we've done. There we have it. I just turned 2 feet of sheet metal into 4, and that is called a magic trick. Okay, from the highest point in the center to the lowest point at the ends, there's an 1.5 inch drop, although most of the drop happens out towards the ends, because if we go 1 foot from the center halfway to the end, that drop is only 1/4 of an inch, and then it starts to angle down a little more steeper than that. Well, we have our board before us, and it's been sectioned off into sections. We have a horizontal central line, we have a vertical central line, and then we have two central lines at 1/3 intervals. We know our drop is 1.5 inches, and half of that's 3/4. So from our central point, we're going to come up 3/4 of an inch, and mark that. Then at both ends, we're going to come below that center line 3/4 of an inch, and mark those. Now we know the drop from the 1/3 intervals was insignificant. It was like 1/4 an inch. So from that point, those 2 points, we need to come up 1/2 inch. And now we'll put in our retaining screws. All right, now we're going to take our thingamajig and then lean it up against those screws like such. Now we have our jig, it's time to see if we can line everything up, clamp it into place. Alright, there's no guarantee that this won't go tits up straight away. Okay, we've not got the most securest bench here, so we're going to start from one end and gently work our way across, tapping upwards and trying to bend the longest part first. Here is our creation, eh? Now it's not beautiful, but neither am I, or the original rain gutter for that matter. Anyway, it is straight, sits nice and flush against the wood, look at that. And the only problem that I can see is that the height difference between high and low is 1.5 inches, but this one is 1 3/4, so we've given it a little bit of spring. And that could cause trouble during installation because it's got a squeeze between hinges and brackets, but we might be able to alleviate that when the time comes to weld it into place. Okay, moving on. Well, in the past you've probably just seen me sitting on the hard concrete, but I've upgraded to a sheet of cardboard. It's a sign of my age. I'm getting soft. We're talking about taking off this panel right here, so there's a few things we need to consider. There's going to be spot welds all along the top and the bottom, but we also have this central piece here that's welded on. We might try and salvage that, but we'll gently cut it out and just sort of see what condition it's in. Now, there's some complicated stuff going on in the corner of the vents over here that almost look like two pieces of metal linked into each other. So that one's got to go, but I'd like to salvage, if possible, the one that's on the back side on both ends. This panel right here is attached with spot welds underneath, so we might have to cut it out, but it'll also have support brackets beneath it. So there's going to be spot welds here and also here and down on the end. Anyway, that piece of metal that you see up there, that's if I need to fabricate any other panels. But while I was at the metal shop, I asked them to cut and press out this guy right here. All right, that's this panel, our replacement. Those bends are very tight, very hard to get. So there we go. And another exciting purchase from John Craddock is that. The top end of the bulkhead. 2 pieces of sheet metal already spot welded together and ready to fit in. It incorporates the top of the vents and also where the seal runs for your windshield. All right, so I think we're good to go. Let's set to work. It's another spot weld. There's always another spot weld. All right, so just down in here and on the other side there are some spot welds I can't get at because these bars are in the way. So I'm thinking about now, it'd be a good time for us to release our patient from its bindings. If we have a look down in here, we can see there's a lot of paint, grime and shit obscuring where our spot welds are, and we need to get rid of that to find them. So I have here a special tool. Steve from Vintage Restorations introduced me to this and he calls it the finger of death. Due to its unpredictable nature and chances of self-harm, I had to have it. Well, we got the bottom half free, but we still have to find a lot of hidden spot welds in amongst the rust and the muck and cut them out. Oh dear, this is a right old tin of worms, isn't it? This edge we see right there, that belongs to the dashboard and that's in terrible condition. This big plate here is full of cancer and corruption. I can see another 6 months or so of procrastination trying to work out what to do with all this. That panel we just took off behind the hinges has support brackets right there. I suspected they must exist, and there they are. We'll have to remanufacture them. So while I'm trying to work out what's going to happen, I think we might start off taking off the second door pillar post. You can already see I've begun the operation. And in the previous episode, I was waffling on about how it's riveted in on one side, spot welded in on the other, but a viewer wrote in and corrected me. Those rivets are for the door seals, which we didn't have. So I can forgive myself for being a little bamboozled, but it is indeed spot welded both sides. Well, let's take that off and then we'll remove this top bit, and then we'll have a better idea of what horrors await us in the future. Shucked. Isn't that what you do to an oyster in the past tense? There's a word that rhymes with that would aptly describe what we're seeing here. Well, throughout the course of this restoration, the driver's side suffered much more corrosion than the passenger side, same with the bulkhead, which is why we started there first. In the previous episode, we cut off this panel here and remanufactured a new one. Beneath it, we found a support bracket, okay? Yes, so I took what I had and took the liberty of making one for each side, like that. Now that we've moved over to the passenger side where things are in better condition, we can see those little support brackets are something larger. In fact, they're joined together as one panel that incorporates them. It also has the inner part of the bulkhead just in front of the vents. It has the lip that the door pillar post spot welds to. And check out these bolt holes at the front, all right? What they have on it is this bracket right here. Because on these trucks, the windshield can tilt forward, but you don't want that happening every time you hit the brakes. So that's what this does. It locks it into place. So we're going to have to remanufacture these brackets here, and also this little tiny zigzaggy one, and that is where the vents live on the sides. All right, so we've got to spot weld those in. We're just going to have to keep ripping panels off. we talk about this catastrophe, we're going to have a little flashback to when this episode, the previous one, started. I said this. I think I got off lightly with the bulkhead, and then I laid out my objective. So I'm going to stick to my original plan of cut and patch out the worst bits, put it all back together, give it a paint job, throw it back on the truck. Hey, the innocence and naivete of youth. So from my understanding, the only panels available to this model vehicle, besides having Radford bulkheads build your whole new one, are the door pillar posts, the top rail, and the footwells. For every other panel, from my understanding, you're on your own. That brings us to a problem because this dash is quite complicated and I don't think I'm going to be able to replicate it. So despite what I said earlier, I really am going to try to restore it. Now this basically stitches onto a big flat panel that you see down there, but that's not how it originally was. We cut that. How it originally looks. There we go. All right, you see that top curvy bit? That goes in underneath the dash to give it some extra support. All right, now the bits that stitch onto that panel, as you can see, are quite buggered. All right, they're all beat up and covered in rust. And the curvy bit's still attached. We've got to remove that, and you can see all that there. So with this top multi-skin panel looking so rough, I think the only alternative is to cut it out. We'll do this in 2 stages, half at a time. Now we've got better access, we'll take the opportunity to do some panel beating and straighten out the bits I feel are salvageable with the help of the hammer and a makeshift anvil. Once things are close to respectable, the grinder is deployed to fine-tune our work and take off the older spot weld lumps. The unsalvageable sections will have new pieces welded in. We don't want our new panel flush on the support bracket, so we pop in some temporary spaces. Then weld the new panel into place. Next we cut out section 2. Due to the limitations of our sheet metal brake, we'll do 2 smaller panels and set them into place. Well, we have had a few problems installing our new panel, as you would expect. The first being that it wants to wander, a little like the surfy surface of an ocean, which is not really the best. The worst thing, however, is it is somewhat concave, bent like a bow. Now I have gone ahead and cut that lip off that we painstakingly bent into place, but you can still see what I'm talking about with this big piece of angle iron. I'll stick it there. Hey, look at that. That's like a 1/4 inch or so down. Now that lip, that needs to butt up flush against the top part of that panel that you'll see temporarily installed on the truck. So that kind of a bow is unacceptable. My measurements, uncharacteristically, were spot on. So it is, upon further inspection, it was the whole dash that was bent. So I was punished for my accuracy. So we're going to have to address these issues. How I'm going to do that is I'm going to grab a 1/8 inch of bar, perfectly cut to size. I'm going to ram that into here on top of those support posts. With that in place, there's vast improvements already. You can see that it's straightening it out and supporting it. So what we're going to do is on these 4 posts, we're going to come in from underneath and put in a spot weld. And then as it's held there, we're going to come in periodically across the top and put in a few spot welds there, and that should keep it all sort of straightish. To weld the thin sheet metal to the thick stuff below, I found it better to cut a hole and create a rosette effect, hitting the thicker metal directly with the lightning wand. Although our support beam is a convenient fix, there's a couple of things to consider that may come back to bite us in the future. One is that you can install heaters in these posh trucks, and that's what these holes here are for the heater hoses that go up to these demister outlets. So a hole does need to be drilled through this panel, and that beam could be in the way. The other is a bracket for the steering, okay, and that is going to live in here like that. And in this case, it appears that that's near on perfect. Time, however, will tell. Now we need to concern ourselves with installing our new lip. Now the opposing panel's offset. The top of it butts up against there. The bottom of it has to sink a little deeper and come up against a backing plate that we talked about earlier that's going to sit in there something like that. So our new lip has to come up a good inch from the backing plate to about that point there. We have our bendy bow-like dash before us, and we grab our angle iron. We place it right there. Now we've got little scribe marks, and they're an inch up from the support panels. However, the ones in the middle, you can see there's a 1/4 inch gap under there, but that's okay. That's what we're trying to compensate for. That's what got us into trouble in the first place. Now, if these new modifications do come back and bite us in the butt, we just cut it apart and start again. We have our new pieces already cut and bent to shape. So what we're going to do is line them up with our scribe marks and clamp them into place. Well, now we've got 2 of our 3 pieces into position. You can see these clamps are stopping our angle iron from getting in there to make sure that they are exactly where they need to be. So we're going to gently just tack them into place so they'll stay. Now we can grab our angle iron, and if we place it in there, you can see that it lines up pretty well with our scribes. And then if we place it like this, you can see it seems to be pretty flat across the board. With the welding done, we need to clean stuff up a bit with the grinder. At this point, we apply a nice thick coat of rust treatment goop, followed by a good rinse in the wheelbarrow. Things are then left to dry beneath a fierce summer sun, which shouldn't take too long. The job didn't go as badly as I feared, yet not as well as I hoped. In an effort to hide some of this mess, we resort to body filler, later to be smoothed out with a vigorous sanding. Now we can apply some paint using our highly sophisticated and secret techniques. Well, as this project has proceeded, I got to thinking, which is always trouble, to get myself a new set of footwells, and well, here they are, Exhibit A, but we can see something right now. This is on the passenger side. If we lift that up, we can see how much shorter the original is to the new one, and I don't think that's a mistake. I think that's an example of the modifications necessary to install a V8 engine, because the engine sits pretty close to the firewall, and I reckon that left bank of cylinders is going to be right in here somewhere. And likewise on the driver's side, we have a good 4 to 6 inches shorter on the original than the new one. Right, so to install new footwells, I would then lose, this is my thinking, the flexibility of installing the V8 engine if I had to. I haven't made a secret of it. I would rather put in something less powerful. However, I'm going to leave the footwells as they are and patch them and repair them as I said. Well, that brings this episode to a grinding halt. In the next, we have to fabricate some more panels and work out how to stitch this patchwork mosaic back together.